Hi, everyone, and welcome to an episode of Trident Talks. I'm Josh, the CEO of Trident, and today I'm joined by Evan Blicker. Evan, thanks for joining.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me.
No problem. Evan, I really wanted to get you on, particularly kind of deep dive into your background in law enforcement for sure, and particular areas, but also then how you made that transition into kind of threat intelligence in the private sector and kind of like the transferable skills, if you like. Can you just give the audience just a very quick kind of overview on who you are and what your background is?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Evan Blicker. For 8 years, I worked for a local law enforcement agency in Florida and also as a task force officer for Homeland Security investigations. During that time, I did cyber crimes and digital forensics, as well as I was a hostage negotiator for 5 years. In cyber crimes, I did dark web investigations and then internet crimes against children investigations.
Okay, awesome. And then headhunted from LinkedIn.
Yes.
To build their dark web. We'll go into that, but definitely want to deep dive into that. So how did you get into law enforcement?
It's something that I wanted to do since I was like 18. And I always wanted to get into cybercrime investigations, but wanted to stay with a local agency, which, you know, if you want to really deep dive into cybercrime investigations, do law enforcement, you go federal. But I wanted the experience of being local. So got hired on with local agency after going through the police academy and worked my way straight to cyber investigations as quick as I could.
Nice, awesome. So let's talk about that transition then. So you were in the dark web team in law enforcement towards the end of your career before you then transitioned?
Yes. So when I first became a detective in the cyber crimes unit, I was assigned as a task force officer with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, to do dark web cases. I did that for about 10 months full time before the needs of my agency kind of shifted, and they needed me to focus more on internet crimes against children, where I did those types of cases like CSAM, traveling to meet a minor, stuff like that. And then I did dark web stuff collaterally as needed along those ways. But unfortunately, the ICAC world it's just there's so much investing, so many cases that come up, so many cyber tips. It's like drinking through a fire hose. So that was a lot of my focus during that time. And then at the end, I was approached by LinkedIn to build out their dark web investigations vertical.
Nice. Okay, cool. When you were in the kind of dark web team in law enforcement as a detective, were you was it heavily involved in cybersecurity, or was it more using that for certain like forum activity and stuff? Like how much of it was actually cyber APT groups, threat actors?
So it was more at that time like narcotics related, as well as we did go into like network intrusion stuff, so business email compromise investigations. Also then, threat actor related to like threat groups, tracking them, seeing what information we can find to see if there's any information that we can build out of that to make our AOR, our area of responsibility, safer.
Nice. Okay, cool. And so the transition to LinkedIn, that's never easy. Like I saw, and you've done quite a few certifications. So were you doing those while you were like serving in law enforcement, or did you do it post?
Yes. So I did those while I was in law enforcement. I've always had a very strong interest in computers and doing stuff like that. So a lot of that was to make it to where I was more credible, testifying for digital forensics, as well as some of it was just things that I wanted to obtain myself to
Nice.
build myself out better than what I was. So in the law enforcement world, a lot of people, like especially that in the digital forensic side, most people don't understand or learn that stuff until they've gotten into the unit, right? I was somewhat of a rarity that I was heavily invested in cybersecurity on my own just because I enjoyed it, did a lot of stuff at the house through a home lab to get into that world, but most don't. So I wanted to continue that path.
Nice, awesome. Which obviously helped you secure your new position in the private sector. Tell us about what you built at LinkedIn. Why were you hired?
Yeah, so LinkedIn wanted to build out a dark web investigations vertical to capture dark web intelligence related to, any issues going on the platform. So I got approached via LinkedIn, surprisingly. LinkedIn uses LinkedIn, and they wanted to have a conversation with me, so I accepted. I thought the opportunity was kind of cool to build out a program for a company the size of LinkedIn. It was a success. I was able to build a successful program, which kind of morphed into more than just dark web. It morphed into off-platform investigations to where my team handled um, all of the investigations that reached outside of the platform. So whether it was related to, ATO accounts, account takeovers, or to fake accounts, or, IDV bypass, things like that. We handled all of those investigations.
Nice. Okay, cool. And just give us an idea on the scale. So how big was LinkedIn, like users? What kind of data like? I'm guessing it's petabytes of ingestion and stuff like that. What kind of scale were you working with, and how big was your team that you built?
So the team was me and three other people at the end. We the the scale of it. So we used vendors in the
Okay.
space to collect stuff, right? Obviously, we at LinkedIn we were trying to be as inside of the confines of risk and liability and things like that. So we used vendors, and a lot of times we would do very specific deep dive investigations into a specific topic. So one
Okay.
person kind of owned one thing, and that was their entire focus. That was all that they were paying attention to when those issues arose. It went to that investigator, and then obviously we would get the one-offs, that came through, but it was very much deep dive focused. So we wanted to know anything and everything about that subject, period. Um,
Okay.
which really benefited because that was information and intel that was being used to build out recommendations to make the platform safer overall.
Okay, cool. And that's kind of like the mission of building the dark web team, right? I
Yeah.
assume. Nice. Okay, cool.
It's to grow our ability to understand TTPs better and allow us to
Yeah.
make better decisions in implementing new models and safety features.
Yeah, controls and okay, cool. That sounds really good. Okay, awesome. And you're doing that for what? 2 years?
Yeah, a little over 2 years. I
Nice.
did that.
Okay, awesome. Right, let's get into the crux of why I actually invited you onto this show. So, hostage negotiator. Everyone's
Yes.
going to want to know what that means, particularly the audience in Europe. We don't really tend to see and hear, and like we don't get many people barricaded up in homes in the UK. Tell us, Okay, so how long did you do that for?
I did that for 5 years. I was a squad leader
Wow.
on the team. I was also the tech lead, so I sourced all of our new technology, demoed it, implemented it, and then trained the team on it. Led all of that.
Okay, cool. And like, so local, were you local law enforcement? Were you SWAT? Were you like, how did it work?
Yeah, so I was part of my local agency's team. We were essentially attached to SWAT. So
Okay.
we would typically get called out before SWAT did to try to resolve situations before actually needing them. The push
Okay.
of my agency was to use the SWAT team as limited as possible, right? So
Nice.
negotiators always responded first. We always tried for a peaceful resolution ahead of time. So that way we didn't need to resort to anything else. Um, and so, but we did join essentially the stack, right? So we had a
Okay.
forward negotiator position where you would suit up in all of your gear and you would be in the stack with the SWAT team. You would be at the building. So that way, if, for instance, we did do an entry into a house, the and we came to where we were able to negotiate in person and face to face, we had a negotiator already there ready to go.
Okay, cool. So just to explain what the stack means for everybody, you were
Ah,
talking about lined up against a wall, ready
yes.
to kick a door in,
Yeah.
right? Flashbangs in the
The
door.
yeah, the team, I apologize for that. It's the team getting ready to make entry. Either the perimeter team that's on the outside or the team that will end up making entry into the building. So we would be right in the middle of the hot zone.
Okay, awesome. So you must have had experiences and times and situations where like you are. So I'm trying to visualize this, right? Especially for the audience. You're lined up. What would a typical scenario be? Would it be someone that you're like SWAT have a warrant for, or it could be a drug dealer, and then they just barricade up in the house, and then your job is to get them out?
Yeah, so it's we did deploy at every single search warrant that our SWAT team went out to. There was always negotiators on site,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of it was barricaded subjects. A lot of it due to mental illness related stuff,
Okay.
to where we were trying to help the person and get it to a peaceful resolve. But we did have things where criminals barricaded themselves. Like I had an instance where somebody had shot at somebody else. They ran from law enforcement and then barricaded themselves in the house. So negotiators would come
Okay.
out and talk and try to get it resolve it peacefully without having to make dynamic entries.
Yeah, understood. Okay, cool. And I'm guessing you've had like that's many late nights. That's like 12 hours, 24 hours just stood outside the house, like coming out, like, come on,
Yes.
guy. Like,
Yeah, we did it as a collateral duty, so it wasn't like our full-time
yeah.
job. So we it was supposed to be that you would be on call for 30 days at a time. So for 30 days at a time, you're essentially not leaving home. Like you always have a second phone. You're
Hmm.
not leaving our county, so you're always able to respond. Um, and if you needed to take vacation during that time, somebody needed to cover you. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it always seemed like you do your regular day's work as a detective. I worked regular hours. I was typically up at like 5 in the morning to get, family things done. And then 11:30 at night, you're laying down to go to sleep. And then there goes the phone. And now you're putting clothes back on and going back to work. And then you're there until the job is done or until you're relieved, which typically relief is 9 to 12 hours later if they're going to relieve a team.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very long days. I had several days that lasted well over 24 hours a week.
Really.
Yeah, working. It's just the nature of the game, I guess.
It does it kind of fall back on then like almost muscle memory training your like your SOPs and stuff like because after 24 hours you become delirious, you become like fatigued, but yet you still have to be super calm and still persist with like what the protocols you're going through, right, to get the person out safely because that's the number one priority, right? Like there must be so many times where you're like just having to just go into like muscle memory zombie mode almost.
Yeah, so it's not like when you work, especially local law enforcement, and you work night shift, like your whole body's ability of how it sleeps and how it doesn't completely changes. Working, overnight shifts where the body's not designed to be awake and you are, and you do that for a few years before you switch to day shift or whatever, it makes your ability to operate on a lack of sleep much
Mm,
better. And but there are times where you're just like, I need to stay in the game. Like you kind of have to give yourself that pep talk to be like, all right, we're cool, but we also do a significant amount of training. So the negotiation team trains at least once a month for an entire day. We go through regular trainings, whether it's trainings on operating equipment to then going through like scenario based training, dealing
mm,
with other negotiators that are playing the role of a person in crisis or a
yeah.
barricaded subject or a hostage situation to try to mitigate that. And then we have there's a whole team that comes out, so it's not just one or two people. On average we would have 12, 13, 14 people come out for the negotiation team alone.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And then just a kind of final point here, there must be so many transferable skills from being a hostage negotiator to like working in cybersecurity, interviewing people, you interviewing for jobs. Like there must be so many we've just pulled on, and maybe you didn't even know.
Yeah, the transition from law enforcement to the corporate world, I don't want to say it was hard, but it definitely wasn't easy.
Yeah,
And the things that probably most law enforcement officers will think is difficult is not difficult, right? Like, not being in the action or missing, the job or whatever. That part's easy, right? And that's what most people, and it's what I thought was going to be difficult.
yeah,
um, it's learning that there's a different way of communicating with people in the corporate world, right? There's acronyms, but there's not as much acronyms, and it's not a high stress. Like there's stress, but it's not the same level of stress as there is in law enforcement. And a lot of the skills are transferable, but there are little nuances in, say for instance, the way the politics go, they're different. Right, chain of
sure.
command isn't as strict as it is in law enforcement. But yeah, the negotiator stuff is probably one of my most valuable skills that I got out of law enforcement. The ability to communicate effectively with and with empathy, helps tremendously. It helps in cybersecurity when, you're interviewing, you're talking to a stakeholder related to an issue, and you're able to actually get to the root cause of that issue, boil it down to be able to provide a better solution because you think out the conversation differently. Also dealing with vendors and the negotiations of that side
with their sales
of it.
teams.
Yeah, with their sales teams. I've actually made some really good friends off of the sales teams of our vendors because we've had to work so closely together, and I was able to build rapport with them instead of just, treating them like salespeople. So, and that part of it has been fantastic. And then interviewing is been, you're not as nervous going through an interview when you know how to communicate effectively, and that's the biggest part of being a hostage negotiator, is that effective communication, the active listening, the ability to build rapport with people and feel comfortable doing that is what really helps.
Yeah, I totally agree. Evan, it's been a pleasure. Super fascinating. Thank you for sharing your story. And I hope everyone enjoyed listening.